Oh boy. Why is this happening? That is so silly. Ignore the man behind the curtain. Just doing some maintenance here. I was trying to do this just during the warm-up, but the candle broke and I had to dig into it with a tool. And then the Bluetooth didn't connect. I need a manager, like a stage manager, who's getting all this ready for me. Hold on a second. Let me get my monitor going. That takes me a second. Sorry, my friends. Should have been ready before. I apologize. Okay. Now I can monitor here. Okay. Who's in the house? Well, let's light up the darkness. Great to be with you on a Friday. Yom Shishi, Erev Shabbos. Shabbos can't get here soon enough. Paul in the Great Northwest, Renee in Indiana, Guy in Ohio, Melissa in Great Neck, Bella in Florida, Joseph in Sierra Nevada, Nancy in North Carolina, Michelle in Jupiter, Gordo in Scotland. PSL, we can hear you right now. Very good. Shandora in the Bronx, Belle in Texas, Karen in Northern California, Libby in Los Angeles. Do you see me online? I see you in the comments. Sharon in New Jersey. Chad, let's light up the darkness indeed. Amen. And Debbie in New Jersey and Alan in New York City. Welcome, everybody. Okay. I hope I didn't utter some kind of a profanity when I was mad at myself because I couldn't get the Bluetooth and the candlestick dug out and everything done on time. I really tried not to do that, and I hope I didn't. Okay, gonna do a double daf today because it's a good time to do it, and these are short. And we got a good head start on page 47 yesterday. We're at the bottom of page 47A. And so today we'll do 47 and 48. Tomorrow night, no class because we're going to go from Shabbos into Tisha B'Av. And a full 25-hour day fast, 25-hour fast like on Yom Kippur. And so we won't have class on Sunday either. Our next class after today will be Monday at the regular Monday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. We're running 3 pages ahead. After today, we'll be 4 pages ahead. Then we'll skip 2. We'll still be ahead. Okay, bottom of 47a. We're doing opening Mishna number 7 here in chapter 3 of Tractate Avoda Zara, the 27th volume of the Talmud. Excuse me. In the case of one whose house was adjacent to a house of idol worship, and the dividing wall fell, it is prohibited to rebuild it because you're going to be contributing to a structure used for Avoda Zara, used for idolatry. So what should he do? He should withdraw into his own property 4 cubits and build the wall there. So I'm just thinking about this, right? You have a property next to a house of Avoda Zara. You have a wall between you and this house of idolatry between you. The wall falls. You can't rebuild that wall because now you're participating in a wall that abuts a house of idolatry. So what are you going to do? You're going to withdraw 4 cubits. 4 cubits is 6 feet. If you think about houses in a city, withdrawing 6 feet into your property, away from the property line, like you just shrunk your property quite a bit. But that's going to be necessary to maintain this distance between you and the house of idolatry. And then we would wonder, well, wait a minute, but if you withdraw your wall 6 feet in, are they going to expand their property and just kind of build the house of idolatry even closer to you? So now the house of idolatry got bigger? We're going to deal with that in a moment. What should he do? He should withdraw into his own property 4 cubits and build the wall there. In Talmudic times, external walls to homes were often built in 2 parts with a functional space between them. If the space between the 2 parts of the wall belonged to him and to the house of idolatry, so already there were 2 walls that were sort of functioning as a wall, but there was space between them, and therefore they owned this kind of little alley, they co-owned it between their 2 walls, then the area is treated as half and half with regard to withdrawing into his property before rebuilding the wall. So he may rebuild the wall 4 cubits from the middle of that space, presumably from the property line. So that's, now we're on page 47b. The stones of the fallen wall, right? This is a wall that was at least co-owned by the house of idolatry. The stones of the fallen wall, its wood and its dust, transmit impurity like a creeping animal, i.e., one who touches them becomes tumah, ritually impure, like one who touches the carcass of a creeping animal. As it is stated, and you shall not bring an abomination into your house and be accursed like it. You shall detest it. And the verb for detested is one of these doubled verbs, shaketz teshekatzenu, and you shall abhor it, for it is a prescribed item. Deuteronomy 7:26, and the term shaketz is used in a different form, sheketz, with regard to creeping animals and the tumah, the ritual impurity that they transmit when we're talking about the carcass of a creeping animal. Rabbi Kiva says those items transmit impurity like a menstruating woman, a nidda. As it is stated, you shall put them far away. As a nidda, you shall say to it, go away. Again, we're not talking about any kind of hygiene or germs or illness or anything like that. We're talking about ritual impurity. Just as you become tameh when you come into contact with a corpse or with the corpse of a creeping animal, a man who has had a seminal emission, a woman who is menstruating. These are items that transmit tumah. And if you're tameh, then you can't enter the holy temple until you have been purified. Or if a priest becomes tameh, he can't eat teruma until he goes through a purification process. Usually it's just immersing in the mikveh and waiting till nightfall. If it's a human corpse that he came into contact with, it's a 7-day purification. If he had tsaras, there's other things that he has to do, bring offerings, etc. What's interesting here is we've been talking about that a Jew is obligated to distance himself from idolatry in every way. Now we're learning that the broken stones that were part of an idolatrous structure transmit tumah. Now, they don't really transmit tumah. I mean, in other words, they don't transmit tumah by Torah law. This is not something that was stated in the Torah. It's a rabbinic decree that we're going to treat those stones like the items that are listed in the written Torah that transmit tumah, because there's this kind of similarity in the language of how they're referred to. So not only do we distance ourselves from them, but if we come into contact, like physical contact with these objects, then we're going to have to go through a purification process. It's just going to be the way that we distance ourselves from Avoda Zara, from idolatry. Whoops. Let me... everything is wrong today. Come on. I just want to put my phone on showtime, which means no disturbances at all. Okay, so Rabbi Akiva says those items transmit impure. Rabbi Akiva says it a little bit differently. Those items transmit impurity like a nidda, as it is stated. You will put them far away as a nidda. You shall say to it, go away. And just as a nidda transmits impurity by carrying, in this case, one who moves the nidda, one who moves a woman while she's menstruating, even without touching her, right? If he causes her to move, like she's, I don't know, standing on a wood block and he lifts the wood block, so he didn't touch her, but he caused her to move by carrying, then he would become tameh with the tumah of a nidda. Likewise, we're going to ascribe that kind of tumah to one who comes into contact with these building blocks of a wall that was used for Avoda Zara, even if he carries them without actually touching them. So too, objects of idolatry transmit tumah by carrying. That's Mishna 7. Now the Gemara. The Mishnah teaches that one must rebuild his wall at a distance from the house of idolatry. The Gemara asks, but how may one do so? Isn't he creating more space for the house of idolatry? And Rav Chanina of Sura said, not a problem. Little said, this is not a problem. As he converts the empty space into a bathroom. Right? You don't want the neighbor, that house of Avoda Zara, to expand, right? This house of idolatry further. Now that you retreated your wall, he's going to expand it. So you need some kind of a buffer. And what kind of buffer are you going to create? A bathroom. Very interesting. In Talmudic times, what did they mean by a bathroom? A ditch? Just like a little, dirt alley where people go to the bathroom? Sounds like. Since the Mishnah teaches that no wall may be built in that space, the bathroom is apparently not enclosed. So the Gemara asks, but doesn't the bathroom need to be a place of modesty? And the Gemara answers, no, not a problem, as he converts it into a bathroom for nighttime, where no one can see him. The Gemara objects again, but didn't the master say in a baraisa, who is a modest person? One who defecates at night in the same place that he defecates during the day, i.e. in a place where no one can see him. Let's pause for a second and express gratitude that we live in the 21st century, where when we want privacy to go to the bathroom, we just go to the bathroom in our house. And imagine in ancient times when to go to the bathroom, you had to walk down the street and get to a place, some kind of like scrap heap, junkyard, place where people go down the street to defecate at night. I mean, thank God we live in a time with indoor plumbing. So who is a modest person? One who defecates at night in the same place that he defecates during the day, i.e. a place where he has privacy. And although we interpreted the Baraisa as referring not to a location but to conduct, teaching that one must conduct himself at night in the same manner, i.e. with the same degree of modesty as he does during the day, with regard to removing his clothing while defecating. This is covered in Tractate Brachos, page 62a. Nevertheless, it can be inferred from here that even at night, one is required to observe the dictates of modesty. And so the Gemara answers, not a problem, as he converts it into a bathroom for children who are not required to observe the same level of modesty. And the Gemara suggests a different answer to the problem of enlarging the space used for idolatry. Alternatively, one can answer that he fences in the 4-cubit space with thorns and shrubs, thereby preventing its use. You can't build a wall that's going to contribute to the idolatry, but you want that space to remain a buffer between your property and the property of the house of Avoda Zara. So you fill it with something, either some kind of a latrine valley, so to speak, or this this buffer of thorns and bushes that would do the same thing. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 7. Now, Mishnah number 8. With regard to idolatry, there are 3 types of houses, each with its own laws. Now, in the note, the concept here is that when the children of Israel entered the promised land, led by Joshua, the wars of conquest ensued. Finally, they rid the land of these child sacrificing death cults, and then established, right, the nation of Israel, and eventually the kingdom of Israel in the Holy Land. Nevertheless, there were structures of the people who used to live there and who were all idolaters. So this analysis kind of pertains to what was already there. With regard to idolatry, there are 3 types of houses, each with its own set of laws. A house that one built initially for the purpose of idolatry. This house is forbidden. You cannot benefit from it at all. If it was in the Holy Land, they would have to tear it down and grind it to dust. If one plastered a house or cemented it for the purpose of idolatry, meaning it was a regular house, it wasn't being used for idolatry, and then an idolater came and converted it into a house of idolatry, and he did renovations for that purpose where he added plaster, cement, etc., and he thereby added a layer to the walls of the house. If you want to reclaim this house so that it would be permitted for a Jew to use, you'd have to peel off all that was added for the purpose of idolatry, and then the original house would be permitted. And if one had a regular house that was not for idolatry, and an idolater brought an object of idolatry into the house temporarily, right? He didn't designate the house to now be a house of idolatry. Rather, he just brought an idol into it. Well, then if he then removed the idol from the house would become permitted again. While the idol is in the house, it's prohibited for a Jew to enter or benefit from that house. That's Mishnah number 8. Now the Gemara. Rav says, one who bows to a house. Now, that is not any one of those 3 cases. The 3 cases we were talking about was a house that was a house of idolatry. In other words, that there was an idol in it and people would go in there and perform rituals of idolatry. A house that was not a house of idolatry but became one through renovations. Or a house that was not a house of idolatry, but it became one temporarily because the only thing that changed was an idol was brought into it. Now, when we get into the Gemara, we're talking about a 4th case. A house that itself was the object of idolatry. Right? These people are bowing to the house as if the house is some kind of a god. Rav says, one who bows to a house has rendered it forbidden. And the Gemara infers, so evidently Rav holds that an item that was detached and that one subsequently attached is considered as if it were still detached. What does this mean? A house which is attached to the ground, right? It's attached to the ground, but it was built with materials that were detached from the ground. And it can become forbidden through worship. So the Gemara asks, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah that if a house was initially built for the purpose of idol worship, it is forbidden? And this indicates that the house becomes forbidden only when it is initially constructed for idolatrous purposes, and that the house itself can never be reclaimed, only if it was originally built for idolatry. Here we're saying a house that was not built for idolatry, but then an idolater actually deified the house itself and bowed down to it. And according to what we just read in the Gemara, that would then create the same condition that the house is fully prohibited as if it was originally built for idolatry, to house idols and perform idolatrous services in it. Right? One who deifies it, bows down to it, is going to make it prohibited in the same way as if it was built to be a house of idolatry housing idols. Now, the Gemara answers that there are two cases where the house is rendered forbidden. Number one, if one built it for the purposes of idolatry, even if he did not bow to it. Or, number two, if he bowed to it, even if he did not originally build it for the purposes of idolatry. In both cases, it is forbidden. The house becomes forbidden for Jews. And the Gemara asks, if so, why does the Mishnah list only these 3 types of houses when in fact there are 4 types of houses? And the Gemara answers, since with regard to the revocation of their idolatrous status, there is no difference between a house that one built for idolatry and one that an idolater bowed down to it, the Mishnah considers those 2 cases as one. These are short Mishnahs now. We just completed our discussion of Mishnah number 8. We move on. Mishnah 9 here in chapter 3. And you see how there's a similarity, right? Number 7 was all about being neighbors with a house of idolatry. Now, Mishnahs 8, 9, and 10 are all going to have a very similar structure, right? So 8 was that there's 3 types of houses of idolatry. Now, number 9, Mishnah number 9, is going to say that there are 3 kinds, essentially, of stone platforms for idolatry. Mishnah 9, with regard to idolatry, there are 3 types of stones, each with its own laws. A stone that one initially hewed for use in a platform for an idol is forbidden, right? You originally cut that stone, human involvement, cutting it. And why did you cut it? For the purpose of idolatry. Okay, well, that cut stone is going to forever be prohibited for Jews to benefit from it. Second case, if one plastered a stone or cemented it for the sake of idolatry, meaning the stone was already cut, not for the purposes of idolatry, the idolater comes along and cements or plasters over that stone to use it for the purpose of idolatry, then it's going to be similar to the house. A Jew can remove that which was plastered or cemented on the stone, and then the underlying stone would be permitted. If one erected an object of idolatry upon a stone and subsequently removed the idol, then the stone would become permitted again, implying, of course, that it would be prohibited while the idol is on top of it. That's Mishnah 9. Now the Gemara. The Mishnah teaches that one may not derive benefit from a stone plastered or cemented for the sake of idolatry. Rabbi Ami says, and that is the law provided that one plastered or cemented within the stone itself by carving or engraving into it. If the plaster or cement was merely appended to the outside of the stone as an external ornament, the stone is not forbidden. And the Gemara asks, but didn't we learn in the Mishnah the law with regard to stones immediately following the law with regard to a house utilized for idolatry? And this indicates that the law of a stone is similar to the law of a house. And in the case of a house that was rendered prohibited when it was plastered or cemented for idolatry, the plastering was not done inside the house itself, but rather on the exterior of its walls. And even so, it was rendered prohibited. So accordingly, even external plastering should render the stone forbidden. And the Gemara answers, in the case of a house, it can also be explained that the plaster or cement was added to the house itself, as there is space between the bricks that can be filled in. And the Gemara asks, as the Mishnah does not specify, are we not dealing even with a house that one plastered with no idolatrous purpose, and then he plastered again on top of that layer for the sake of idolatry, rendering the house forbidden, even without affecting the house itself, right? The plaster that was used for idolatry, because now there's an in-between layer, never actually came into contact with the bones of the house, shall we say. And therefore, when you remove that outer layer, the house should be permitted. And the Gemara asks, and the Gemara answers, Rabbi Ami was not explaining at what point a stone plastered for idolatry becomes forbidden. Rather, when Rabbi Ami's statement was stated, it was stated with regard to revocation of the stone's idolatrous status. And he taught that even if one plastered or cemented within the stone itself, when one removes that which was added, the stone becomes permitted. Who can revoke the idolatrous status of the stone, right? To take an item from the realm of idolatry out of the realm of idolatry, we've learned that only the idolater can do that. A Jew cannot remove the status. We learned that by rabbinic decree. The Gemara explains Rabbi Ami's ruling. Lest you say that since one plastered or cemented within the stone itself, it is equivalent to a stone that one initially hewed for idol worship, and therefore the entire stone would be forbidden forever for Jews. Rabbi Ami teaches us that the stone can become permitted by the removal of that additional layer of plaster, which was only added for the sake of idolatry. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 9. Now we're on page 48a, and we begin Mishnah number 10. There are 3 types of trees that were used as part of idolatry. A tree that was initially planted for the sake of idolatry. This tree will be forever prohibited for benefit for Jews. Number 2, if one lopped off part of the trunk of a tree or trimmed its branches for the sake of idolatry, right? He altered the tree for the sake of idolatry by, carving into it, trimming off bark, lopping off trunks or branches, thick branches, etc. Okay, so that part of it is going to be prohibited. Now, you lop off a branch, you can't put it back. So what are we saying? It's not something that was added to the tree. Obviously, if something was added to the tree, we could remove that. Right? If a tree was not an idolatrous tree, it wasn't planted for that, the idolater came and hung things on it or added material to it. If you could remove that material, presumably the tree would then be permitted again. But that's not what we're talking about. Here, he lopped off parts of the tree. So how are we going to restore the tree? He's definitely forever altered the tree from what it was since he lopped off those branches. Does that mean that the tree is never going to go back to being permitted? No, but very interesting. If one lopped off part of the trunk or tree or trimmed its branches for the sake of idolatry, i.e. to worship that which would regrow there, right? The idolater is shaping the tree. He trims it and lops off parts of it so that now he can, the growth from then on is being channeled in some way, being adjusted in some way, being trained in some way for the purpose of idolatry. Right? So if he lopped off the part of the trunk or trimmed its branches for the sake of idolatry, i.e. to worship that which would regrow there, and the tree's trunk or limbs regrew, then one removes that which has regrown in the areas that the idolater cut off, and we burn that. The new growth that comes in the places where the idolater, trimmed or lopped off parts of the tree, and then the remainder of the tree would be permitted. If one erected an object of idolatry beneath a tree and subsequently removed the object of idolatry, then it would be permitted to derive benefit from the tree. So that's similar to the previous 2 cases, either the idol being temporarily brought into the house. Jew can't enter that house where there's an idol there. But once the idol is removed, the house becomes permitted again. A stone platform, if there's an idol on top of it, we can't derive benefit from that stone platform. If the idol's removed, then it becomes permitted again. And likewise, if they bring an idol under the tree, then we can't benefit from that tree while the idol is there. But if the idol is removed, the tree becomes permitted again. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. The Mishnah teaches that if one lopped off or trimmed the tree's branches for the sake of idolatry and it regrew, the tree is permitted upon the removal of the new growth. The sages of the school of Rabbi Yanai say, and this is the law only when one sank the shoot of a vine into the ground or grafted onto the trunk of the tree itself. And the Gemara asks, but didn't we learn that if he lopped off part of the tree or trimmed the tree's branches, the growth is forbidden? In order to render a tree forbidden, according to the sages of the school of Rabbi Yanai, the act dedicated to idolatry must be sinking or grafting. That's quite different than cutting something off. Right? Sinking means you take a shoot, a branch, a vine from a plant, you sink it into the ground, and so now it lays down roots. Right? And it's an interesting way to create a new plant, where you take an existing plant, bury some of its branches that are still attached to the plant or to the tree. It will come out of the ground again, and it's like it creates a new plant, but obviously it's still connected organically to the old one. That's sinking. Grafting, you know what grafting is, right? You take a piece of a plant and then, you peel some of the bark, put those together, tie them together, introduce some compounds that help it, help the grafting process work. And now you take a piece of a plant that was attached to some other plant, and now it's growing from this plant, right? That's a graft. And now the branches will grow on this tree. Okay, so what's happening? Is it lopping and trimming that for idolatry, that now that whatever is new growth there in that location, we have to take off in order to render the tree permitted again? Or is it sinking and grafting? Let's keep reading. Okay, hold on a second. So the Mishnah indicates that even cutting off part of a tree renders the new growth forbidden. So the Gemara answers, let me just read that again so we have the flow. At the sages of the school of Rabbi Yanai say, and this is the law only when one sank the shoot of the vine into the ground or grafted onto the trunk of the tree itself. So the Gemara asks, but didn't we learn that if he lopped off part of the tree or trimmed the tree's branches, the growth is forbidden? In order to render a tree forbidden, according to the sages of the school of Rabbi Yanai, the act dedicated to idolatry must be sinking or grafting, which is tantamount to replanting the entire tree. The Mishnah indicates that even cutting off part of the tree renders the new growth forbidden. So which is it? And the Gemara answers, rather, when the statement of the sages of the school of Rabbi Yanai was stated, it was stated with regard to the revocation of the idolatrous status. And what they meant to say was that even if one sank the shoot of a vine into the ground or grafted onto the tree itself, effecting a more significant change, nevertheless, when one removes that which has regrown, the tree is permitted. As, lest you say that since one sank the shoot of a vine into the ground or grafted onto the tree itself, it is similar to a tree that one initially planted for idolatry, and therefore the entire tree should now become forbidden. The sages of the school of Rabbi Yanai counter this and teach us that even in this case, the tree is permitted when that which has regrown is removed. Shmuel says, in the case of one who bows to a tree, right? Now we're making the tree itself the object of idolatry, as opposed to bringing an idol under it. One who bows to a tree, its additional subsequent growth is forbidden. And Rabbi Lazar raises an objection from the Mishnah. If one lopped or trimmed the tree for the sake of idolatry, and the tree's trunk or limbs regrew, one removes that which has regrown and burn it. And this indicates that if one lopped or trimmed it, the additional growth is forbidden. But if one did not lop or trim it, even if one bowed to the tree, the growth is not forbidden. The Gemara answers that Shmuel could say to you, in accordance with whose opinion is this Mishnah? It is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, who maintain that a tree that was planted not for idolatry and only subsequently was worshipped, an idolater came along, right, and started worshiping the tree after it had already been in existence for a while and not as an object of idolatry. The rabbis who maintain that a tree that was planted and only subsequently was worshipped, this tree is permitted, as it was not initially planted for idolatry. And Shmuel says his statement in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef bar Yehuda, who says that a tree that was planted not for idolatry, but then it was subsequently worshipped, does become forbidden. So accordingly, bowing to a tree renders its subsequent growth forbidden. And now we think back on the case of the house. A house that was built for idolatry can never be, taken back and rendered permitted because it was initially built for idolatry. And we said that a house that was not built for idolatry, but one bowed down to it, objectified and deified the house itself as a god, has rendered it prohibited just as if it had been built for that purpose. The ways that the house could be rendered permitted was when it was not built for idolatry. It was renovated for the purpose of housing an idol and containing idolatrous rituals. Then if you remove the renovations, it could be permitted again. Or if an idol was simply brought into it and then it was removed, then the house could be brought back into a state of being permitted. But if it was deified, then no. So here, if there was a tree and it was not planted for the sake of idolatry, idolater came and bowed to it, right? He deified the whole tree. Shouldn't that render it prohibited forever? So he seems to be saying, no, if it was not planted for the sake of idolatry, an idolater came and bowed to it, didn't alter it, he just bowed to it, then it could be rendered permitted again, although perhaps maybe we have to get an idolater to revoke its idolatry status. But let's keep reading. Rava, and that is according to the view, right, of Shmuel, who says that the tree could become permitted again. Whereas Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says, no, if it was planted not for idolatry, but then it was deified, it will never be permitted again. Now, Rav Ashi objects to this. From where is it derived that Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda and the rabbis disagree with regard to additional growth? Right? One thing is, did an idolater come and just bow to it? Another is, did an idolater come and alter the tree by trimming or lopping off parts of it? Perhaps all agree that additional growth after the tree was worshipped is forbidden, whether he adjusted it or not, just that he came along and bowed to it, and now any new growth after that might be forbidden. And they disagree only with regard to its trunk. The Gemara explains what the nature of this dispute would be. As Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda maintains that its trunk is also forbidden, as it is written, and you shall break down their altars and dash in pieces their pillars and burn their asherim with fire. Deuteronomy 12:3. So burning with fire destroys the whole tree, which indicates that the entire tree is forbidden, including its trunk. And the rabbis maintain that the trunk of the tree is permitted, as it is written, you shall break down their altars and dash in pieces their pillars and hew down their asherim and burn their graven images with fire, in Deuteronomy 7:5. Which is the tree whose hewn part is forbidden, but its trunk is permitted? You must say it is a tree that one planted, not for idolatry, and then subsequently worshipped. Therefore, the tree can remain permitted, even though what grew after it was worship, right, outer growth, would be prohibited. And if you would say that we did not explain their opinions in this manner previously on page 45b, as the source given there for the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda is the same verse given here as the source for the opinion of the rabbis, well, simply reverse the explanation given there to match the one given here. And the verse cited there as the source for the opinion of the rabbis, namely, and burn their asherim with fire, should instead be considered the source for the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, who deems even the trunk of a subsequently worshipped tree forbidden. And the verse cited there as the source of the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, namely, and hew down their asherim, should instead be considered the source for the opinion of the rabbis, that only subsequent growth is forbidden. But the Gemara rejects this whole suggestion. It cannot be that all agree that additional growth is forbidden when a tree is planted and subsequently worshipped, because, if so, who teaches the Mishna that says that the tree is forbidden when one lopped it or trimmed it? It would neither be the rabbis nor Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda. If one were to say that the rabbis teach it, that can't be, as they maintain that even in a case where one did not lop it or trim it, but simply bowed to it, the additional growth is forbidden. And if one were to say that Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda teaches the Mishnah, well, that cannot be, as he maintains that even the trunk of the tree is forbidden after it has been worshipped, not just the subsequent growth. The Gemara responds, defending Rav Ashi's suggestion. If you wish, say that the rabbis teach the Mishnah, and if you wish, say that Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda teaches it. We can work it either way. The Gemara explains the possibilities. If you wish, say that Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda teaches it, as when Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says that even in a case where one did not lop it or trim it, right, one did not alter the tree, The trunk of the tree would nevertheless be forbidden because it wasn't planted for idolatry, but an idolater came and bowed to the tree. It is only in a case where one worshipped the tree without specification, i.e., not to any specific part of the tree. But if one lopped it or trimmed it for the sake of idolatry, he has revealed his intention, namely that he believes that the additional growth is suitable for his idolatry in the areas where he altered the tree, but that the trunk of the tree is not suitable for his idolatry because he didn't alter that. Therefore, in such a case, only the additional growth would be forbidden. And the Gemara explains the other possibility, and if you wish, say that the rabbis teach it, although they maintain that even without lopping or trimming the tree, the additional growth is forbidden if it is worshipped. Nevertheless, it was necessary for the Mishnah to mention the case where one lopped it or trimmed it specifically. Otherwise, it might enter your mind to say that since one performed an action on the tree itself, the trunk of the tree should also be forbidden. Therefore, the Mishnah teaches us that only the additional growth is forbidden and not the trunk. So this is pretty, complicated and tough to follow. If you ever buy a property and you have reason to believe that the people who lived there before you were idolaters, who performed idolatrous rituals and worshiped the tree that is in the yard, find out as much information as you can that leads you to suspect that, and then consult with your local Orthodox rabbi, because this is not a simple question and answer. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. And that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 10. And now we'll do one more short Mishnah and short Gemara to wrap up the day. Mishnah 11. Which tree is deemed forbidden as an Asherah? That's Asherah trees. These were trees that were worshipped in the name of a false deity called some kind of a goddess, Asherah, which is mentioned in the Torah as one of the kinds of idolatry that needed to be rooted out of the Holy Land. So which tree is deemed forbidden as an Asherah? Any tree that has an object of idolatry beneath it. So that's not worshiping the tree, that's bringing an idol under it. Rabbi Shimon says any tree that people worship, that they bow down to the tree itself. And there was an incident in Sidon involving a tree that people would worship, and Jews found beneath it a heap of stones. So Rabbi Shimon said to them, examine the heap of stones. Right? So the interesting question is, the people, the idolaters, were bowing to the tree. They found stones under the tree. So if they were worshiping the tree, then the stones weren't worshipped. They weren't objects of idolatry, so maybe they should be permitted. On the other hand, if in addition to worshiping the tree itself, they were worshiping some kind of an idol under the tree, then the stones should be prohibited. So Rabbi Shimon said to them, examine this heap of stones. And they examined it, and they found in it an idolatrous image. So Rabbi Shimon said to them, since it is the image that they worship, we can permit use of the tree to those who wish to derive benefit from it. So what they determine is it's one or the other. They don't worship the tree and what's under it. They either worship the tree or the idol they bring under it. Since they found an idol under the tree, it must mean that the tree was just a setting for that, and we're not going to render the tree prohibited. Now the Gemara. The Mishnah teaches which tree is an Asherah. And the Gemara asks, but didn't we learn in the previous Mishnah that there are 3 types of Asherah trees? And the Gemara answers, this is what the Mishnah is saying. Of the 3 trees mentioned in the previous Mishnah, there are 2 where the trees themselves are worshipped, and everyone agrees that these trees are forbidden. And there is 1 that is subject to a dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis. Which is the Asherah with regard to which Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis disagree? It is any tree that has an object of idolatry beneath it. And Rabbi Shimon says that any tree that people worship is forbidden, but that a tree under which an idol was placed is not forbidden. And the Gemara presents a question. Which tree is assumed to be an Asherah, even without specific knowledge that it was worshipped? This is a very interesting insight into how the Jews had to process what was going on around their neighbors. Rav says, any tree that the idolatrous priests sit beneath and they do not taste of its fruits. as they apparently consider the fruits consecrated to the idol. And Shmuel says, even if they so much as say, not with their actions, but with their words, these dates are for the house of Natsrephe, which is a house of idolatry, then the tree becomes forbidden. And this is because the idolaters would throw the dates into beer and drink it on their festival day, even though they weren't doing anything with it the rest of the year. Now, Maimar says, the elders of Pumbedisa said to me that the law is in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel, that you have to be stringent, right? So the Jews wouldn't necessarily know how the idolaters were worshiping their gods. Maybe they could ask, or maybe it was not really convenient to ask, or maybe the idolaters were gone. And the question is, well, when they were here, what did they do? Right? And they would have to think, well, we're not sure. Did they worship the tree, or did they have an idol under the tree, which they now taken away? So the difference, in outcomes to that question is if they worship the tree is going to be prohibited. They just need to cut it down. If they worship an idol under the tree, maybe the tree could be rendered permitted. How would they know? Well, one of the behaviors that they observed is how the idolaters who had been there before treated the fruit of the tree. And if they ate it, that would indicate that it was not an Asherah dedicated to idolatry. But if they didn't eat the fruit, it would indicate that it was. Okay, a few questions. Sharon, if a stone was removed from the temple, right, from the holy temple, at the time of its destruction and plastered for idolatry, can it ever be rescued and repurposed for use in the temple when rebuilt? Well, obviously, if that stone was originally in the temple, it was not originally hewn for the purpose of idolatry, right? It was hewn for the holiest possible purpose to be used in the Beis Hamikdash, in the holy temple. Then, the enemies of the Jews came and destroyed the temple, and we went into the exile. And let's say that they then repurposed those stones and they plastered over them. So I think, according to what we read, that we could remove that plaster and reclaim the stones. I think the question that maybe you're asking, or maybe let's ask it now, is what if they took our stones that were in the temple and they cut them for the purpose of their idolatry? Now the stone has been altered in a way that can never, it can never go back to the way that it was. It has been cut for the purpose of idolatry. I'm not sure, but I would suspect that at that point the stone could not be reclaimed because it had been altered permanently for the purpose of idolatry. But I'm not sure. Bell, must it be the particular idolater who is specific to the cult that treated the object as an idol that can de-sanctify, or that can remove it from the realm of idolatry? In a word, the idol, or could it be any idolater that can perform this function? Not well worded, sorry. No, I get your question. We did learn that, right? It doesn't have to be the idolater himself who dedicated, something to idolatry. I mean, if he built a house to idolatry, it seems like it will be prohibited forever. But if he, dedicated something and started worshiping it, but then he removed it from the realm of idolatry, then he can, right, remove it from idolatry, and then it would render permitted again for a Jew to use it. And we learn that it does not have to be the same idolater who dedicated it to idolatry who now revokes its idolatrous status. So no, it doesn't have to be the same idolater. Camille asks, or comments, makes me think of baobab trees in sub-Saharan Africa. They serve as burials and become deified that would be forever forbidden. So I don't really know the nature of that religion, but if you're telling me that it's not just a site of burial, and not just somehow this idea that the souls of the departed, kind of linger and mix with the tree, but rather that there's a kind of like deification and worship of the elders, those who passed on, and now their souls are worshipped in, what is definitely idolatrous rituals mixed up into this tree, sounds like it was very interesting. Yes, it sounds like it would be forever prohibited because they bowed down to it, right? Not because they used it just as a site of idolatry, but because they bowed to the tree. Then the tree would be prohibited forever for a Jew to benefit from it. Now, of course, the difference between such a tree, going through this process in the Holy Land versus outside the Holy Land. Outside the Holy Land, we just have to not go near it. If this happened in the Holy Land, certainly when the temple is standing and there is a Torah-based government in the land of Israel, then, and this would only happen when Mashiach comes, then, I don't want to say that definitely, but sounds like something that would only happen when Mashiach comes, then there would be a positive obligation to remove such a tree from the Holy Land. And finally, Sharon, do we know what tree now is the Asherah tree? Well, the thing is, it doesn't sound like that's a, species, like a genus and species of tree. It sounds like Asherah trees were trees that were used for the worship, the idolatry of this goddess that they had named Asherah. And it wouldn't have to necessarily be one kind of tree. They might have used different trees. For some reason, I always imagine, like an old tree with spreading limbs, like an oak tree or an olive tree or something like that. But here we're learning about fruit trees and even a date tree. I mean, a date tree, that's a palm. So that's not something I had imagined. But it sounds to me like Asherah trees could be different types of trees that were dedicated to this purpose of idolatry. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again Monday at the regular Monday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. We won't have class Saturday or Sunday this weekend because we're going right from Shabbos into Tisha B'Av. It's the saddest day on the Jewish calendar, but may it be a time of learning, a time of meaning, a time of introspection, a time of remembering what we've lost. And then as we start to lift the heaviest practices of the morning practices as we go into the afternoon of Tisha B'Av. And very often people will watch a kind of Torah movie. Yoel Gold makes a movie every year about, sort of like uplifting stories of Jews who've done heroic things. There's and Aish, I think, has a movie this year as well that you can get for free if you go to aish.com. And that's the kind of thing that people do on the afternoon of Tisha B'Av. And then as we come out of Tisha B'Av and we break our fast, then we're on a zooming, uplift, headed toward Elul, headed toward Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and a time of just mounting meaning, joy, connection. As we get into Elul, the king is in the field. And so all of that is ahead of us. So we're going to have a great Shabbos, God willing. And then, we'll do Tisha B'Av, and we'll do it with intention and connection. And then when we emerge from it Sunday night and break our fast, we start a really beautiful period in the Jewish calendar. All the best, my holy sisters and brothers, and good Shabbos.